On the evening of December 7, 2000, Trevor Deely went to his office's Christmas party at a nightclub down the street from the Bank of Ireland in Dublin, where he had been working in the IT department for about a year. Upon leaving the party at 3:30 a.m., Trevor couldn't get a ride back to his apartment due to a massive taxi driver's strike. His only option was to walk home through an area notorious for crime and gang violence. It was a 20-minute walk home, and since the bank was pretty much just up the street, Trevor decided to make a quick stop at his office to grab his umbrella before walking home in the rain. Strangely, the bank's CCTV footage shows a man dressed in black standing behind one of the pillars of the main gate. The man can be seen standing there for almost half an hour before Trevor arrives. A little after 3:30 a.m., the man in black pulls out his cell phone to take a call, and a few seconds later, Trevor walks by, also on the phone. Police later determined that at that exact time, Trevor had made a phone call to a coworker who was still at the bank. The CATV video shows Trevor arriving at the bank's front gate, and a second man dressed in black steps out of the shadows to talk to him. Trevor ends his call as he opens the gate and talks to the man in black. It doesn't look like they know each other, but Trevor doesn't seem to be scared or concerned. The man simply stands by the gate as Trevor walks in, and a few minutes later, the man in black walks out of the camera's view. Trevor's coworker reported that he and Trevor shared a cup of tea that night and talked about the party for a while, and that Trevor had also logged onto his work computer for a couple of minutes. Just before he left the bank at about 4 a.m., the CCTV footage shows Trevor stepping out onto the street and opening his umbrella before walking home. He didn't appear to be followed. A few minutes later, at about 4:06 a.m., he made a call to a friend to let him know that everything was all right and that he was on his way home. But since his friend was still asleep, he left a voicemail. That voicemail would be the last time that anyone heard from Trevor Deely. At 4:14 a.m., Trevor was seen walking by an ATM on a street about 15 minutes away from his apartment. Less than 30 seconds later, a man in black appears on screen, apparently following Trevor. 16 years later, in 2016, the CCTV footage was digitally enhanced, and police determined that the man in black from the bank was the same man who later followed him. This was the last footage where Trevor was seen alive. Although he missed work on Friday, his co-workers didn't seem to find it strange, considering that many other employees were still hungover from the party and had also taken the day off. After his friends and family couldn't get in touch with him over the weekend and he didn't show up for work on Monday, he was immediately reported missing. Trevor's friends and family led the search from the beginning, and it was actually his friends, and not the police, who managed to get the disturbing footage from that evening. Unfortunately, they didn't have access to the footage until 4 days after his disappearance, which meant that the police had lost valuable time in the search for Trevor Deely. There may have been more CCTV footage of Trevor from that night, but at the time, CCTV cameras recorded their footage on VHS tapes, which were often recorded over, with new footage, erasing the previous footage in the process. Over the years, several theories about Trevor's disappearance have surfaced, but none of them have been confirmed. Some have speculated that he might have been intoxicated that night, which may have caused him to fall into the water under the bridge and drown. But Irish police searched all nearby bodies of water, and no signs of Trevor were ever found. Most people believe that the mysterious man who was seen following Trevor in the CCTV footage had something to do with his disappearance, but to this day, he remains unidentified. In 2017, police received a tip from an anonymous source who claimed to know what had happened to Trevor. According to this source, the man who followed Trevor that night was a gang member who murdered Trevor after he refused to help him gain access to the Bank of Ireland building. The man supposedly buried him in the woods, a few miles away from where Trevor was last seen. For several weeks, 20 police officers and a search dog continued to search the site, but after 2 months of digging, the search was called off. 23 years after the incident, Trevor Deely's chilling disappearance is an open and active case. The events leading up to it, however, are still a mystery. The haunting disappearance of the Jameson family in 2009 gained public attention and media coverage after some disturbing footage of the family was found by police. In 2009, Bobby and Sherilyn Jameson lived with their 6-year-old daughter, Madison, in Eufaula, Oklahoma. Although they lived what appeared to be normal lives, the Jamesons' marriage was a rocky one, and police have long tried to figure out if their difficult circumstances were somehow tied to their disappearance. Around the time of their disappearance, the couple had been dealing with financial issues. Since 2003, the Jamesons had been on disability after Bobby was involved in a serious car accident that left him with severe chronic back pain. His wife, Sherilyn, had her own health issues. She had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, but sometimes refused to take her medication. In 2009, the family decided to drive up to check out a 40-acre plot of land in Red Oak, Oklahoma, about 30 miles away from their home in Eufaula. They specifically asked to inspect the plot of land without a real estate agent present. The Jamesons had told their friends and family that they were planning on moving there to start a new life after pulling their 6-year-old daughter, Madison, out of kindergarten over some kind of disagreement with their daughter's school. During the week they drove up to Red Oak, nobody heard from the family. Because they were an unusually private family that often went off the grid without contacting anybody for weeks at a time, nobody immediately assumed that the Jamesons had disappeared. But after a pair of hunters discovered the family's truck abandoned on a dirt road at the edge of the woods 9 days after they were last seen, it was clear that something was wrong. Inside the truck, police found a GPS, cell phones, empty pill bottles, wallets, and $32,000 in cash, which was extremely strange considering the Jamesons had been struggling financially. Disturbingly, the Jamesons' dog was found alive in the truck, dehydrated and starving after spending days in the locked vehicle. Police also reported that they found a chilling 11-page angry letter from Sherilyn to Bobby, in which she accused him of hating his daughter and being a loner and a hermit. According to a specific police report, there was a haunting sentence in the letter that read, "I would not wish my daughter to be raised in foster care because of you being in prison for attempted murder and her mother dead." At this point, it was impossible for anyone to know what had happened to the Jamesons. Immediately after it was determined that the family was missing, police started to search around the area where the truck was found. For 9 months, a search team consisting of 400 volunteers, 16 search dogs, unmanned drones, planes, horses, and a specialized search unit scoured the woods in search of the missing family. During this time, police found unsettling footage recorded by the family's home security cameras from the day the Jamesons vanished. In the video, Bobby and Sherilyn can be seen loading their truck in preparation for the trip, but something immediately seems off about the footage. The couple make over 20 trips to load the truck, sometimes putting things in the truck and then taking those same things back to the house, then back to the truck again. A few times, the husband and wife even walked from the truck to the house and back again, without carrying anything in their hands. Strangely, the couple changed clothes several times throughout the video. It is hard to tell exactly what is happening due to the low frame rate of the footage, but they seem to not interact with each other a single time. A psychologist who was called in to review the footage immediately attributed the couple's bizarre, trance-like movements and strange behavior to illegal drug use. Bobby had a history of drug use, but it was never confirmed whether the couple was under the influence of drugs during the video. After looking deeper into the Jamesons' lives, police were only left with more questions. A pastor close to the family mentioned that shortly before their disappearance, Bobby had told him that there were spirits living on the roof of his house, and he had even requested that an exorcism be performed at his home multiple times. Bobby Jameson also owned a copy of the Satanic Bible, which he had been reading before his disappearance to try and find a way to make the spirits leave his house. Friends and family members also mentioned that they believed the house was haunted, and many of them reported having paranormal experiences and feeling an overwhelmingly dark presence whenever they visited the house. Despite the validity of these claims, It is known that Sherilyn Jameson was involved in a kind of witchcraft. She frequently held seances at her house and often spoke about her supposed paranormal experiences. Sherilyn owned cats, and after they died, she suspected that her neighbors had poisoned them, so she spray-painted the words, "Witches do not like it when their cats are killed," on a large metal storage container on the Jamesons' property. The mystery around the case continued to grow, but it wasn't until November 2013, 4 years after the Jamesons' disappearance, that 2 deer hunters stumbled upon the skeletal remains of 2 adults and a small child about 3 miles from where the family's truck had been found 4 years earlier. Because the bones were heavily decomposed, it wasn't until 8 months later that forensic investigators were finally able to confirm that the skeletons belonged to the Jameson family. Due to the state of the skeletal remains, the cause of death couldn't be determined. With so many disturbing events and unsettling circumstances leading to the family's disappearance, many theories about what had happened to the Jamesons began to surface. Police began by investigating Bobby Jameson's father in connection with the murders. Less than 6 months before the family's disappearance, Bobby had sued his father for $10,000 for making him work unpaid at his gas station and promising him that he'd give his son a stake in the business in the future. After his father sold the gas station and refused to pay him, Bobby started a lawsuit against his father. Things took a dark turn, and Bobby had to get a restraining order after his father threatened to kill him and his family multiple times. Even though Bobby's father was a known meth user and was involved in criminal activity, police concluded that he was not involved in the family's deaths. One popular theory is that, considering Bobby Jameson's drug use and the unexplained $32,000 found in the family's car, it's possible that the Jamesons were involved in the drug trade and were killed in a drug deal gone wrong. The area where the bodies were found is notorious for drug activity, but no solid evidence has been found to support this theory. Police found a small hole in the back of Bobby's head, but forensic experts believed that it was too small to be a bullet hole and that it was most likely caused by animals after his death. Other people have speculated that the Jamesons could have been involved in a cult. The strange symbols and cryptic writing that were found on the family's truck seem to support this idea, and Sherilyn's own mother claimed that her daughter was on a cult's hit list for some unknown reason. Although there has been cult activity in eastern Oklahoma since the 1990s, and their presence has increased over the years, it was never confirmed whether the Jamesons had any involvement with a cult. Because of the hate letter found in the truck and the couple's history of mental illness and drug use, some people think that either Bobby or Sherilyn could have murdered their family before killing themselves. With no evidence at the scene to support any of these theories, the case has remained unsolved for 14 years. Police and investigators are still searching for new evidence, but there are currently no suspects for the disappearance and murder of the Jameson family. On the night of Valentine's Day 2017, a home security camera installed outside the house of 35-year-old Ellie Tran showed her returning home from work and pulling into the driveway, unaware that a dangerous stalker was hiding just outside the camera's view, waiting for the right opportunity to attack. As soon as she got out of the car, the stalker lunged at her from behind the bushes and tackled her to the ground before running away on foot just seconds later. While Ellie looked mostly unharmed at first, the attacker had actually injected her with a cyanide-filled syringe while she was on the ground, which, for those who don't know, is one of the deadliest poisons on Earth. What made this situation even worse was the fact that this wasn't a crazed stalker or a random serial killer. Instead, this was 30-year-old Joseph Marino III, Ellie's ex-boyfriend, and someone she had a 2-year-old daughter with. The two got into a relationship sometime in late 2013, and things started off quite well. However, Joseph started becoming aggressive when Ellie became pregnant and invited her parents to live with her. Ellie had actually immigrated to the US from Vietnam before meeting Joseph. She wanted to build a stable life in the US with Joseph and their child, but she also wanted her parents to be a part of this new life. So in 2014, she flew her parents to the US and gave them a place at her and Joseph's home. This became a major point of contention between the couple, with Joseph becoming more and more aggressive with each passing day. Things escalated to the point of physical violence by mid-2016, forcing Ellie to break up with Joseph and get a restraining order against him. She also kept full custody of their daughter. However, Ellie knew that Joseph wasn't going to leave her alone so easily. She lived in constant fear that he would one day show up and take their daughter from her, which was the only reason she installed security cameras both inside and outside her home. But even Ellie couldn't have predicted the lengths Joseph was willing to go for revenge. Immediately after the attack on February 14th, Ellie tried to get inside and call 911. She didn't know exactly what had happened, but she knew he had injected something into her leg. Tragically, she passed away before making that call. Luckily, her mother saw everything, including Joseph's face as he was running away. She called emergency services and Ellie was rushed to a nearby hospital. Unfortunately, it was already too late. Cyanide prevents cells from using oxygen, which is needed to keep them alive. The cells can no longer produce energy, and vital organs like the heart and brain start failing rapidly, leading to a state of internal suffocation even if the person is breathing. By the time Ellie reached the hospital, she had already suffered severe brain damage. She was pronounced brain dead shortly afterward, forcing her parents to make the painful decision of cutting off her life support. The home security footage, alongside the statement from Ellie's mother, allowed investigators to zero in on Joseph and arrest him just 3 days later, on February 17th. They also searched his home and found several other dangerous items, like guns and materials for making explosives. Despite the evidence, Joseph tried to claim that he was in a different city on the night of the murder and that the person in the home security footage was someone else. However, the prosecution didn't believe any of it. Phone records proved that his statement about being in a different city was a complete lie. More importantly, prosecutors were able to prove that the murder was fully premeditated. Forensic analysis of his internet traffic revealed that leading up to the crime, he had searched terms like, "How many milligrams of cyanide will kill you? What if cyanide gets in the bloodstream? And what if cyanide gets injected?" Investigators were also able to track down the people he purchased the cyanide and the syringe from on marketplaces like eBay and Etsy. However, the most damning evidence proving his sinister motives came from an incident that happened back in December 2016. According to Ellie's mother, Ellie was coming home from work one day when suddenly a man approached her and threw an unknown chemical on her. Thankfully, the chemical only burned her hair and caused minor burns on her scalp, allowing her to recover without any permanent injuries. Ellie later told her mother that she believed the attacker was Joseph. This showed that Joseph was coming up with ways of harming Ellie even before the lethal attack. Joseph, however, stayed adamant that he was innocent, and even went on a hunger strike for a few months before his trial. Prosecutors believe he did this to lose a lot of weight and look significantly different from how he looked in the security camera footage, possibly hoping to trick the jury into handing out an innocent verdict. Unfortunately for him, this plan failed as well. He stood trial in December 2018 and was sentenced to life in prison. On July 29, 2008, a mother of two named Susan Powell recorded a video where she documented the assets in her home in Utah, just in case, in her own words, something happened to her.
This is me, July 29th, 2008. It is 12:33 Mountain Time. Covering all my bases, making sure that if something happens to me or my family or all of us, that our assets are documented. Hope everything works out and we're all happy and live happily ever after as much as that's possible.
The video was made on her attorney's advice, who feared that Susan's husband, Josh, might attempt to sell some of her most expensive assets. In the years leading up to the now infamous video's recording, the couple's marriage had been under a lot of strain, and during the recording, Susan lets on that things had been everything but peaceful between her and Josh over the past few years.
Conoco Minolta lens. And I had necklaces too. I don't know where those are. I just got in a rage, as you can see, and broke this. There's duds and pearls and opals in there. Broke this and threw all my DVDs and made a mess. Because he was angry at me. This was about a year or two back.
Although Susan had been seeing a divorce attorney to look into the possibility of leaving her husband, they were still living together in 2009, almost a year and a half after the video was recorded. On the morning of December 6th of that year, Susan went to church with her 2 boys, after which a neighbor went to visit her, leaving her house at about 5 p.m. That night, Josh allegedly took the couple's 2 boys, Charlie and Braden Powell, on a camping trip in the middle of the night in blizzard conditions to a campsite on the Pony Express Trail. According to Josh, Susan stayed home because she was tired. The story goes that the next day, Susan's family and friends reported her missing when her 2 boys weren't dropped off at daycare. When Josh came back from the supposed camping trip with his sons, he said that when he had left the previous evening, his wife had been sleeping peacefully at home and that he had no idea what could have happened to her. After searching the couple's house in Utah, police found no signs of foul play, but things continued to get stranger as the investigation continued. Inside Susan's safe deposit box at the bank where she worked, the cops found a handwritten will and testament in which Susan alleged that Josh had taken out a $1 million life insurance policy on her a few weeks prior. Disturbingly, she also wrote, "If I die, it may not be an accident." About 10 days after she mysteriously disappeared, the authorities also found that Josh had filed paperwork to withdraw money from a retirement account, and he was officially declared a person of interest in the case. Suspiciously, Susan's family and friends reported that during the search efforts, Josh never seemed to show a genuine interest in finding his wife. But despite the mountain of evidence stacked against him, Josh Powell was never formally charged in his wife's disappearance. During the investigation, the cops questioned the couple's 2 sons, but it was hard to get any information out of them on account of their age. Even though they mentioned that Josh had taken Susan with them on their camping trip on the night of the disappearance, they also made outlandish claims, including allegations that they had arrived at the campsite by airplane. This made it impossible to use their statements as evidence that Josh was responsible for his wife's disappearance. Shortly after, Josh and his 2 sons moved back to their home state of Washington, but the authorities soon determined it wasn't safe for Braden and Charlie to be living with their father in the middle of the investigation, and Josh lost custody of the boys. This is where things get extremely disturbing. On February 5, 2012, more than 2 years after Susan's disappearance, a state caseworker brought the 2 boys to Josh's house for what was supposed to be a supervised visit. Immediately upon their arrival, Josh locked the social worker out of the house and took the lives of both his children and himself by setting the house on fire with gasoline. If his behavior during the initial phases of the investigation was suspicious, the unspeakable crimes Josh committed on that day in 2012 were about as clear of an admission of guilt as you can get in a case like this. In the aftermath of the tragic incident, the cops started looking into Josh's brother and father, who they suspected knew more about the case than they were letting on. Even though they had solid evidence to suggest Michael, Josh's brother, had helped him conceal Susan's body, the case reached a dead end when Michael also took his own life in 2013. More than a decade later, Susan's dad won a lawsuit against Washington State for nearly $100 million on grounds of negligence and failure to protect the 2 children who were supposed to be in the state's custody, a big chunk of which he gave to a charity to support domestic violence survivors. Almost 15 years after her disappearance and the murder of her 2 children, people still gather in Susan's hometown of Puyallup, Washington, every year to pay their respects and honor her memory. The last video Susan made, documenting her assets, received a lot more attention after everything had happened. With hindsight, the video is portrayed in a much more disturbing light. Susan saying things like, "I'm recording this just in case anything happens," Makes you wonder if she knew her husband could do something this horrible as she was filming. Over the years, Susan's father has been alerted to possible locations where his daughter's remains might be buried, including abandoned mines in Utah and other isolated locations. Sadly, every lead has turned out to be a false alarm, and it's very unlikely that Susan's remains will ever be found. Amber Tuccaro was a 20-year-old, Kenny V commented under the username SnakeBitMcGee on a video titled Area 51 Technician's Son Discloses Secret Alternative Energy. The comment read, "That ain't nothing. I am a long-distance hiker. One time during one of my hikes out by Nellis Air Force Base, I found a hidden cave. The entrance to the cave was shaped like a perfect capital M. I always enter every cave I find, but as I began to enter this particular cave, my whole body began to vibrate. The closer I got to the cave entrance, the worse the vibrating became. Suddenly I became very scared and hightailed it out of there. That was one of the strangest things that ever happened to me." As you can imagine, Kenny's comment immediately caught a lot of people's attention. Some people called Kenny a liar, while others encouraged him to find the cave again and record his findings, and so he agreed to do just that. On October 18th of that year, Kenny uploaded a video of his long-distance hike in the Nevada desert, in which he attempted to find the cave for a second time.
Well, here I am on my hike up here in the mountains north of Las Vegas. This is a canyon I just walked up in. Now you can't tell, but my truck is way out there by the mountains at the very end of.
At the beginning of the video, Kenny stands at the top of an abandoned mine shaft and gives his viewers an introduction to the monstrous hike that lies ahead of him that day. As the day goes on, he continues to record what he sees as he travels through the Mojave Desert, trying to locate the cave again.
There's some interesting stuff coming up here. Look, see those? Look at that. Kind of right there. That's kind of cool. All right, I'm going to turn it off and then I'll turn it back on here. Look at that. That's pretty cool right there. Huh. All right, off with the camera.
That was the end of the video Kenny posted because he failed to find the cave the second time through. A lot of his viewers criticized him pretty brutally, calling him a fraud and pressuring him into trying to find the cave for a third time. In a sea of comments provoking Kenny, a user named Lee Kilmister made a particularly disturbing and ominous comment that read, "No, do not go back there. If you find that cave entrance, don't go in. You won't get out." Still, on November 10th of that year, Kenny told his family he was going on an overnight hiking trip, and he set off by himself for the third time to find the mysterious M Cave in the Mojave Desert, one of the hottest and driest regions in the world. That was the last time he was ever seen. On November 22nd, 2014, 12 days after he set off on his search for the M Cave, a group of search and rescue volunteers found Kenny's phone lying at the top of the same mine shaft he had pointed out in his M Cave video. Unfortunately, after his phone was located, the case went cold and Kenny's body was never found. After the mysterious disappearance, people started coming up with all sorts of theories to explain what could have happened to Kenny, with most people claiming that he had either fallen down the abandoned mine shaft or died of overexposure. Some of the more outlandish theories reported that Kenny could have witnessed a crime out in the middle of the desert and had to be silenced, or that he found a secret military base and was eliminated by the government. However, a few months after his disappearance, a comment on the original video made by a woman named Sharon Pilgrim shed light on an entirely new possibility, that Kenny had taken his own life. The comment read, "I am the girlfriend that Kenny spoke of in the video. Kenny has not been found, and I feel that he probably will not be found for many, many months, if ever. I want you to know that I do not think Kenny had an accident. I believe he took his life. He battled with depression for many years and would not take medication or see a doctor. He quit his job a little more than a year before he disappeared. In response to his phone being found at the mine shaft, Sharon then added, "The mine shaft was about a 4-hour hike from his car. It is my feeling that he left it behind so that he could not be tracked from the GPS in it." He also did not take his video camera with him on this solo hike. It was left in his home, so he had no intention of filming anything. I am healing from my loss and look forward to new experiences with desert hiking, camping, and taking beautiful pictures of our desert. Enjoy your adventures of life, and thank you for the kind, loving comments sent my way. Even though the woman's comment seems pretty genuine and brings light to the very real possibility that Kenny took his own life, the case still doesn't have a solid conclusion. Over the years, several other YouTubers have found caves in the same area Kenny was hiking in that almost perfectly resembled the letter M, and recently, one of them even had a "Danger Restricted Area" sign put up next to its entrance. So, even though it's possible that Kenny took his own life in the desert, his disappearance has still left more questions than answers.